Welcome back to another episode of Chalk or Not, which we debuted last week for UFC Vegas 101, and it got a pretty good reception from a lot of people that checked it out. So we'll keep the damn thing going. I really appreciate everybody that checked it out, dropped a comment, dropped a like, or even dropped a subscribe from this segment. And I'm hoping that it proved fruitful for you guys going into UFC Vegas 101, and once again going into UFC 311, which I'll be talking about here. Now, just again, quick reminder that we for this segment for chalk or not, what I classify or categorize as chalk is anything that's minus 185 or worse, which means that there will be 3 fights that I won't be touching on in this segment because they are much closer than those odds indicate. So, yeah, we'll see here 11 of the 14 fights being talked about and classifying whether I believe it is chalk-worthy or not. And another quick reminder, even if I put something in the not section, as you guys will see from the fancy graphics that I got made up here, it doesn't mean that I don't think that person will win or lose. It just means that I do not believe that the odds or the percentages are correct in terms of making a reason to actually go out there and play that fighter. So yeah, keep that in mind. Again, you may not agree whether I believe it's chalk-worthy or not, but this is just my advice to you. This is my guide to help you guys, especially for you, those of you that love to put together chalky parlays. I'm hoping that I can help you avoid some of the landmines on some of these cards. So without further ado, let's get right into it. We're going to go bottom to top. First fight up is chalky here, where we have Tagir Ulanbekov coming in at minus 300 as he takes on Clayton Carpenter. The big unknown here is how good Clayton Carpenter is. He is undefeated in his professional career. He did drop one amateur fight to Reyes Cortez, who was actually the brother of Tracy Cortez, and that was way back in 2016. And it's safe to say that Carpenter has gotten way better since then. The only issue I have is that we haven't seen him face much threat from a grappling standpoint in his pro career. So it's tough to say how well he can scramble or work against the grappling that's going to be coming back his way from the Dagestani fighter. And that unknown alone is why I can't justify playing that minus 300 here on Ulanbekov. Sure, he should win this fight. I am predicting him to win this fight just based on his strength of schedule and the Dagestani wrestling that we have known to come from, or that he's capable of. But Carpenter, again, might be able to squash those plans. He might be able to stop those takedowns, provide some reversals, or even land some big shots that could cause Ulanbekov to be a little bit gun shy. So for that reason, Ulanbekov, in my opinion, is not chalk-worthy in this fight. I believe he wins, but the big unknowns on the Carpenter side and how good he could be is kind of what's holding me up from wanting to put Ulanbekov in any parlays or being too heavy on him on this weekend's card. Next up, we got Bernardo Sopai coming in at minus 250, going up against Ricky Tercios. Very intriguing matchup that was originally supposed to happen back in November. I believe it was the November 9th card, but a medical issue with Tercios pulled him out of that matchup. Now they're rescheduling it for this weekend, and Sopai obviously had a very spirited effort against Vinicius Oliveira, which was a short notice UFC debut for him last year, where he nearly got Oliveira out of there, but unfortunately came up short. Now here against Ricky Tercios, I believe his ability to be more aggressive and at least land more effective shots, maybe even get some grappling going as well, is going to cause Tercios a lot of problems. Tercios is very unorthodox, active, and awkward with the way that he throws his offense, but I think a lot of that is going to play into Sopai's game, which will allow him to make this look a little bit easier and better for the judges. Usually his cardio is on point, and I don't expect this to be as much of a slobber knocker as the Vinicius Oliveira fight was, which is why I believe we'll see Sopai land more effective shots throughout this fight, get some decent control time, and end up winning this fight on the scorecards. And at minus 250, I believe he's chalk-worthy. I think this kid is that good, and he has the chops to cause Tercios a lot of trouble here. Next up, Rinya Nakamura coming in at minus 600, going up against Muin Gafarov. Obviously, Gafarov has the strength of schedule and the experience advantage here, but that should not take away from the dominance that we've been seeing from Rinya Nakamura over his 9-fight career. This guy's done a good job in terms of improving his striking, especially showcasing the amount of power that he has in his hands and putting opponents away. But he can also go out there and grapple for 15 minutes as he's needed to over his last 2 UFC fights, and he does a good job in terms of controlling his opponents and probably only needing 3 takedowns per fight, 1 per round, to secure victory in most of his matchups. And I expect him to do that with ease here against Gafarov, who's going to be looking to take Nakamura's head off and might have some decent defensive grappling chops of his own. But as this starts to get into deeper water, I expect Nakamura to start pulling away and make this look like a minus 600 performance, which is why I believe he is chalk worthy in this spot. Again, around that minus 600, minus 700 range is kind of my limit. No matter how big the discrepancy is, the sport of MMA is so volatile that in a banana peel moment can really slip things up. But I believe Nakamura should be safe enough here to cash as a potential leg for anybody throwing him into a parlay at minus 600. Next up, Carol Hossa coming in at minus 250, going up against Eileen Perez. Hossa is clearly the better fighter overall here. The issue she's had in the past, and which is why she is 3-3 over her last 6 fights, has been the lack of urgency in some of her matchups. However, I think we saw her learn a valuable lesson against Irene Aldana, a matchup where we saw her batter the lead leg of Aldana and then eventually fall off in terms of efficiency in the second and third rounds. She stayed on the gas in her next matchup against Pani Kianzad and put on one of the best performances that we've seen from her inside the octagon. She has good enough takedown defense and good enough jiu-jitsu that I don't think Perez will be able to incur a ton of control time here, or accrue, I should say, a ton of control time, which is usually the name of the game for her. If she's unable to secure takedowns or have much top control, she really struggles on the feet. But luckily for her, most of her opponents have been unable to stop her takedowns, which is why she's been coming out on top. Look for Hossa to stop the takedowns, or at least muzzle the amount of control that Perez gets. And then once they're on the feet, Hossa is the far superior striker. She'll chew up that lead leg. She'll land combinations after that. And it wouldn't surprise me if we actually see Hossa get a finish later on in this matchup, which is why I believe Hossa is chalk worthy in this spot. Next up, Azamat Bakoyev coming in at minus 190, going up against Zachary Reese. Bakoyev coming in as the LFA middleweight champion, I believe it is. He comes into this matchup on short notice, finally earning that UFC contract that he's been vying for a couple of years now. He's solid, very good, has some good skills about him. Obviously, the wrestling you come to expect from most Russian fighters. Since teaming up with the American Top Team, he's been a little bit more confident in his striking, which led to him getting that knockout victory over Chauncey Foxworthy back in June, which ultimately earned him this short notice UFC spot. And it seems like the public is really on the Reese side, especially taking the big plus money that he's been at. I believe this line dropped closer to minus 400, and now you see him down to minus 190, which means that people love Reese and think that he can get that early finish. But I think Bakoyev will show off good discipline here, and he'll be able to muzzle the offense of Reese and really put that wrestling grind on him and eventually come away with the decision victory here. At minus 190, I believe he is chalk worthy, and whether that means you want to go out to him and parlay him or even just play enough to win one unit on him straight up, I don't think that would be a bad idea here, considering the skill discrepancy that I see. Reese is very dangerous, like I said, but I still think that Bakoyev will come out on top and manage to avoid most of the danger that Reese provides. Hence why I'm going to label him as chalk worthy in this spot. Next up, Grant Dawson coming in at minus 240, going up against the veteran Diego Ferreira, who actually turns 40 on the day of this fight. Unfortunately for him, he's going up against one of the better lightweights on the rise here, and I really believe that Dawson will do a great job in terms of putting on a classic Dawson performance, which will lead to him getting a second or third round finish. Ferreira has shown some decent resistance against other guys that try to put him in similar positions as Dawson, but Dawson has a much better gas tank as of late than we've seen from Mateusz Rąbecki, and I think he'll do a good enough job in terms of blending his takedown attempts behind some of the flashy techniques that we see from him, and then eventually he'll start to break down Ferreira, who I believe will not be able to keep up with that grappling pace, and I think that will open up a TKO or submission opportunity for Dawson. But at minus 240, I believe he is chalk worthy. Even though a lot of people believe that Ferreira is a live dog in this spot, I'm going to stay strong and plant my flag that Dawson is one of the better favorites around this line to take on this card. Once again, I believe he is chalk worthy. Next up, Bogdan Guskov coming in at minus 325, going up against UFC newcomer and short notice debutant Billy Elikhanna. Now, I believe Guskov, obviously coming off of 2 knockout victories, is riding a bit of momentum. You know, he's really believing in himself, has some solid power, starting to walk opponents down and land those big shots against them. But opponents are often able to get some solid success on him early on in matchups, but then they start to fall off, and that's where Guskov is able to take over and find the knockout victories that he's been been able to. He has a clear defensive grappling issue that I think Alicana might be able to take advantage of. But even if Alicana stuck with his usual striking style, I believe he can piece up Guzkov from distance and make him pay with solid counter shots as Guzkov gets a little bit reckless when he enters the pocket with his power. I do believe Alicana is a very solid addition to the UFC roster, and at plus 275 is worth a consideration as an underdog. Thus, I believe that Guzkov is not chalk-worthy in this spot. Next up, we got Jailton Almeida coming in at minus 430, going up against Sergey Spivak. Obviously, Almeida looking to go out there and do what he does best, bully opponents to the ground and smash them from that top position, either sinking in rear naked chokes or just smashing them with elbows and ground and pound to get the TKO stoppage. Last time around, he was able to get that body lock trip takedown on the much bigger Alexander Romanov and eventually work to get that rear naked choke. And I think he can do the similar thing here against Sergey Spivak. Spivak is a solid wrestler in his own right, but I don't think he can deal with the strength of Almeida, especially with the explosivity and the clearly improved takedown approach from Almeida, who has often utilized a desperation takedown approach, just as we saw in the Curtis Blades fight, which led to him getting TKO'd. Now, if he can mix up his bag a little bit, look for trips and throws, that might be a better way of getting fights to the ground and establishing his dominance. And I think he'll be able to do that with relative ease here against Spivak, which is why I believe he is a chalk-worthy spot. Next up, Peyton Talbot, minus 1,000 going up against Raoni Barcelos. Now, normally I would jump at the opportunity to bet Barcelos at plus 700. I believe he is one of the more underrated guys on the roster, but it's obvious that his age is starting to catch up with him. His lack of speed and lack of durability has caused a lot of issues for him, as we saw Umar Nurmagomedov put him away. We even saw Kyler Phillips utilize a lot of speed and keep Barcelos kind of thinking there. And I think Talbot will eventually find that big shot here to put him away. But as I said earlier in this podcast, minus 1,000 is unbettable in MMA. I don't care how big the skill discrepancy is, but there can be some sort of banana peel moment, or even the fact that Barcelos has a huge experience advantage over Peyton Talbot. If Barcelos' chin somehow holds up in this matchup, things could get a little bit shaky for Talbot considering the all-around skill that Barcelos has. With that said, I do believe Talbot wins this fight, and I think the best way to actually attack him in this matchup, or at least try to get some money off of this fight if you like him, is either to circle in on that Talbot round 1 KO prop, which still hasn't dropped, and I'm not sure if bookies will actually drop it, or the under 2.5 at plus 125. But to play a minus 1,000 in a sport like the UFC and MMA, I can't get behind that. Hence why I'm going to have to put Peyton Talbot in the not chalk-worthy. Again, hone in on the props here. Don't look for that minus 1,000. It just does not do enough for parlays and does not pay off enough here, in my opinion. I think he's the faster, more powerful striker, which is ultimately going to lead to him getting the knockout victory here. But playing minus 1,000 on him, again, I just can't get behind that whatsoever here. So again, Talbot will win. He should get the knockout, but not chalk-worthy at minus 1,000. All right. Co-main event, Umar Nurmagomedov coming in at minus 285, going up against Merab Dvalishvili. Now, Nurmagomedov, obviously a very hot prospect, I guess contender now at 18-0. I believe he is, 29 years old as well, clearly in his prime. Very good wrestler, as we come to know with these Dagestani guys, but also a very crafty and flashy striker, often using that lead foot or back foot to actually throw up kicks up the middle, question mark kicks, spinning back kicks, spinning techniques, just as he knocked out Raoni Barcelos a couple fights ago. He's very, very talented, and I think he has the defensive grappling chops here to keep Merab from getting off on his game. And that's not so much of, keeping from getting taken down, but countering those takedown attempts and chain wrestling and getting the better positions and maybe even getting onto the back of Merab and eating up some control time there. But I think the important part here is Nurmagomedov is going to be more keen on landing damage and making it look better once the fight ends up reaching the scorecards, which I think it does. Merab has gotten away with muzzling his opponents because of his activity and his energy level, but I think that Nurmagomedov can thwart that here, landing the cleaner shots, maybe getting a couple knockdowns and some control time, but I do believe that Nurmagomedov is chalk-worthy here, and which is why I believe he leaves the Intuit Dome and new bantamweight champion. Now moving over to the main event, we have Islam Makhachev coming in at minus 330, looking to defend his lightweight title for the fourth time, rematching Arman Tsarukyan. Very, very fun fight here between two of the best lightweights on the planet. Obviously, back in 2019, Makhachev was able to sweep Tsarukyan on the scorecards 30-27 all around. But going back and watching that fight, it was much closer than that scorecard actually makes it seem. I believe Tsarukyan has taken a lot from that matchup and has done a good enough job in terms of improving his game over the last 5.5 years, specifically with his striking, so that when his wrestling can't get off, he has that power striking approach he can lean on to still land significant damage on his opponents. It'll be interesting to see what kind of approach he looks to take coming into this matchup, and if he can utilize his wrestling defensively, he might be able to land some big enough shots on Makhachev, and we saw Makhachev get busted up by Dustin Poirier last time around. Do not overlook the fact that Poirier was able to take at least 2 rounds on one judge's scorecards against Makhachev before eventually getting finished in the 5th round of their matchup. The 2 other judges only scored one of those rounds for Poirier, but they scored different rounds. So one judge scored the 2nd round, one judge scored the 4th round, I believe it was. So Makhachev can be touched up on the feet, and if Tsarukyan looks to utilize that striking approach, he could come out on top in this matchup. I do believe Makhachev still ends up winning. This guy is a champion. This guy knows what to do with his fight IQ, how to get the win, when to get for the takedowns, when to control, how to keep guys down, and I have no doubt that Tsarukyan is trying to improve his game to thwart that type of approach from Makhachev, which is why I believe this fight would play much closer than the minus 330 indicates here. I'm still picking Makhachev to win this matchup, but I do not believe he wins over 75% of the time. I believe this is a much closer fight, like I said. Hence, why I have to put Makhachev into the not chalk-worthy category for this matchup. Again, I believe he wins, just as I believe the other guys that I've put in this category, other than Bogdan Guskov, I believe those guys win. But at certain points, if you want to play the long game here, you have to take percentages into account, and I do not believe those guys are worth the percentages or odds that are tied to their names here. All right, there you guys go. Chalk or not for UFC 311. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I will be back later this evening for the quick picks version of the UFC 311 breakdown, getting right to the point for every single matchup for you guys. So make sure you guys come on back and hear my thoughts right there. There you guys go. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, drop a comment, and I will see you guys again later today. Peace.